The Vikings, comprising composed and unflinching warriors, passionate explorers, and boundary-defying traders, form a significant community in Scandinavia. From America to Asia, from the remotest islands to Africa, traces of the Vikings can be found in many parts of the world. Historians refer to the period starting from the end of the 8th century and extending to the mid-11th century as the Viking Age. The TV series Vikings, which began in 2013 and continued until 2020, focuses on the time elapsed since the beginning of this period. Frankly, this series was one that I also enjoyed watching. However, television series and movies based on historical events can raise certain question marks in the minds of viewers. Are the events depicted in the series really true? Did the Vikings play a role in the events narrated in the series? Answering these questions requires research. In this video, we attempted to address these questions. Let's see how much the major events align with historical facts. When talking about the Vikings, inevitably, we must also mention legendary narratives. Let's begin our analysis with the most important character in the series, Ragnar Lothbrok. In the series, Ragnar is portrayed as an ordinary farmer with great ambitions and goals. He leads a happy life with his wife Lagertha and son Bjorn. Like many farmers, Ragnar, in accordance with Viking tradition, tends to his crops and participates in raiding expeditions along the Baltic shores every spring. The city where Ragnar and his family live, Kattegat, is ruled by a noble named Jarl Harald. So, how did Ragnar really live? We have actually prepared a video about Ragnar Lothbrok before, where we delved into the details of the subject. However, refreshing our information here might be useful. First of all, let's clarify this. The sources about Ragnar are quite limited. We mostly gather information about his life from the Ragnar Lothbrok saga, written in Icelandic in the 13th century. Today, most of what is known about Ragnar and events mentioned in the series are derived from these Icelandic sagas and other Norse stories. The Vikings series generally shapes its characters based on these sagas. We encountered different information about Ragnar's family in these sagas. Now, let's examine these sagas and compare Ragnar's life with what is depicted in the series. Lagertha is shown as Ragnar's wife in the series, but Norse sagas do not mention a wife named Lager. The name Lager appears only in Gesta Danorum, a Danish history from the 12th century. The information obtained from there is also quite limited. Naturally, this situation leads many historians to approach the historical authenticity of Lagertha with skepticism. Even if we assume that the series uses Gesta Danorum as a source, we can say that the information provided about Lagertha does not align with what is narrated here. We learn from Gesta Danorum that Lagertha is Ragnar's wife. However, this source does not contain information about Bjorn being Lagertha's son. According to various Scandinavian sagas, Bjorn is mentioned as the son of Aslog, not Lagertha. The portrayal of Aslog's mother as Avarhitter and Sigurd in the series contradicts this information. At this point, it's important to note that the writers created new family ties for Ragnar. Another issue is the depiction of Ragnar as an ordinary farmer in the series. In reality, the situation is quite different. According to the Ragnar Lothbrok saga and Gesta Danorum, Ragnar is noted as the son of the legendary Swedish king Sigurd Ring. Therefore, Ragnar was not an ordinary farmer but rather a noble king. The series creates a portrait of Ragnar as an ordinary person with big dreams that viewers can empathize with, witnessing his rise and easily empathizing with his actions. However, from a historical perspective, the Ragnar portrayed in the series does not reflect the truth. Now, let's discuss how accurate Ragnar's actions are. In the early episodes of the series, Ragnar sets sail with his men without the knowledge of Jarl Haraldsson and reaches the shores of England. Later, he returns to Scandinavia after raiding a monastery. Throughout history, Vikings did amass significant loot by raiding monasteries. However, The events in the series are not narrated in a way that aligns with historical facts. The Lindisfarne raid, which would later be considered the beginning of the Viking Age, is indeed a historical event that occurred in 793. However, while the raid itself is acknowledged, there is no historical record confirming that Ragnar led this attack, as the series suggests. Furthermore, the series presents a scenario in which Ragnar organizes the Lindisfarne attack and commands it. Even if we were to accept that Ragnar led the Lindisfarne raid as a Viking leader in his mid-20s, the series implies that he was also present at the Paris siege. Considering the Lindisfarne raid occurred in 793, the Paris siege took place in 845. Even in the most plausible scenario, if we were to accept that Ragnar, as a Viking leader, led the attack on Lindisfarne in his mid-20s, he would need to be around 80 years old during the Paris raid. This age is highly exaggerated for the time in which Vikings lived. Additionally, the omission of this event from Viking sagas almost reduces the possibility of Ragnar being present at Lindisfarne to zero. Now, let's examine another iconic scene from the series. Throughout the third season, Ragnar, along with his soldiers, lays siege to Paris. During the prolonged siege, unable to conquer the city, he feigns his death. He then presents himself as dead and conveys through his son Bjorn that the siege will not be lifted unless a Christian funeral is held for Ragnar. Charles agrees to this demand to lift the siege. Later, Ragnar, along with some Viking warriors, enters the city in a coffin. During the funeral ceremony, he emerges from the coffin, secretly kidnaps the princess, and opens the city gates for the Vikings. This allows Paris to be easily captured and plundered. Subsequently, the Viking army returns to Scandinavia, leaving Ragnar's brother Rollo behind to ensure the security of the army for the upcoming expedition planned for the region the following year. However, Rollo, by making a deal with Emperor Charles, accepts to serve him in exchange for being given the Duchy of Normandy and defending the northern borders of his country against the Vikings. When Ragnar and his Viking followers return to the region, they learn of Rollo's betrayal. In the ensuing battle, Rollo emerges victorious, and Ragnar's Viking followers discover what had happened in Scandinavia. According to Frankish records, in 845, a Viking leader named Ragnar led 120 ships and over 4,000 soldiers along the Seine River, besieging Paris. After obtaining a ransom, the siege was lifted, and he returned to Scandinavia. Historians believe that this Viking leader mentioned in Frankish records could be Ragnar. However, the information that Rollo sided with them in this siege is not accurate. Rollo was either a baby or not yet born when Ragnar organized the Paris siege. In reality, Rollo was one of the Viking leaders who participated in the Paris siege organized by Siegfried in 885. When this siege did not yield results, Siegfried left the region. However, despite this, Rollo continued the siege and withdrew in exchange for a ransom. On his return journey, he plundered what is now known as northern France, named Normandy. Rollo, long after this event, in the spring of 911, had once again besieged Paris with his Viking followers. However, this siege ended in failure, and Rollo was defeated by the Frankish army. Though defeated, Rollo had some plans of his own. He wanted to put an end to the constant Viking raids from the Seine River. It would be wise to set brothers against each other at this point. He reached an agreement with Rollo, and in exchange for converting to Christianity, he was granted control over a significant portion of northwestern France, known today as Normandy. This information aligns with the series. However, this event took place 66 years after the year 845, which is considered the year when Ragnar besieged Paris. Consequently, Rollo and Ragnar did not live in the same period, nor were they brothers. The writers here presented different Viking leaders who lived at different times in history as if they lived in the same era. unlocking the potential for many new events in the series and showcasing the impact of Vikings in Europe to the audience. However, this choice led to the chaotic presentation of some historical events. The motivation for Rollo accepting Charles III's offer is portrayed by the series as jealousy towards Ragnar's rise. While this choice contributes to the series' narrative, it does not reflect the realities in many aspects. Harald Finehair's participation in the Paris siege with Ragnar is also one of the script's errors. In the series, Finehair joins Ragnar in the Paris siege, and his brother Halfdan accompanies him. In reality, Halfdan and Harald were not brothers. In fact, Halfdan was Harald's father. Furthermore, Harald's presence in the Paris siege was not possible. Harald was born approximately 10 to 15 years after the year 845 when Regan Harus, believed to be Ragnar, besieged Paris. Therefore, not only did he not participate in the siege, but he was also not a contemporary of Ragnar. Another event to focus on in this episode is Ragnar's plan to capture Paris. This plan is indeed impressive, but is Ragnar the actual mastermind? No, he is not. This plan actually belongs to a Viking leader named Huston, and it has no connection to Paris or France. Huston, along with Bor Irid La, set sail for the Mediterranean and raided some regions of Italy during this expedition. The plundered city of Luna in Italy was personally executed by H. Now let's fast forward the series a few more episodes. After suffering defeat, Ragnar retreats into seclusion and disappears for an extended period. During his absence, his sons grow up and he ages. He later reappears and seeks help from his sons for a planned expedition to England. Bjorn, Ub, and Sigurd reject Ragnar's offer, while Ivar accepts it. Later, when Ragnar and Ivar, along with their men, are en route to England, they get caught in a storm, losing most of their ships and men. After all these events, they desperately seek refuge with King Ecbert of Wessex. Ragnar, here, asks King Ecbert to deliver him to King El, allowing Ivar to return to Kattegat if he forgives the life of Jesus. He promises that his sons will only seek revenge on King El and not attack Ecbert. After some consideration, Egbert realizes the benefits and agrees to Ragnar's proposal. Later, according to the agreement, Ragnar is handed over to King El. El, taking advantage of the opportunity, fulfills his sworn vow to kill Ragnar years ago by throwing him into a pit filled with poisonous snakes. Upon returning to Kattegat, Ragnar informs his brothers that their father was killed by El. In response, Ragnar's sons gather a massive army to embark on an expedition to England to avenge their father's death. The Viking army, known by historians as the Great Heathen Army, did indeed land in the East Anglia region in the year 865 and embarked on a large-scale invasion of the island. However, historical records do not provide any information regarding leaders such as Ivar and Ub, who were said to be at the helm of this army, being sons of Ragnar. The notion that this campaign was orchestrated by Ragnar for the purpose of avenging him is actually only narrated in the Scandinavian sagas, and the portrayal in these sagas differs somewhat from what is shown in the series. According to the epic sagas, Ragnar was quite distressed by the overshadowing fame of his sons and decided to organize a new expedition to regain his own glory. However, Ragnar was already old, and his former glory was a distant memory. Very few people agreed to join him on this expedition. Additionally, contrary to the series, Ivar did not accompany Ragnar on this journey. In this expedition with a small number of men, Ragnar was defeated by King El and was executed by being thrown into a pit filled with poisonous snakes. Unlike the series, there is no mention in the sagas of King Egbert delivering Ragnar to El. According to the sagas, King El took great pleasure in avenging Ragnar and informed Ragnar's sons of his death. Ragnar's sons were infuriated by this event and swore to avenge Ragnar by taking action against King El. Let's now turn away from the legendary verses in the sagas and see what the dusty records of history tell us. According to Anglo-Saxon records, the Great Heathen Army landed in the East Anglia region in 865 after setting sail from Scandinavia. This army had a significant force for that time, consisting of several thousand warriors. Leading the army were Viking leaders named Ivar, Ub, and Hvitserk. There is no historical information indicating that Ivar, Ub, and Hvitserk were brothers. Additionally, the information about Ragnar being killed by King El and the assembly of this army for Ragnar's vengeance is not found in contemporary sources. Modern historians mostly view these Viking leaders not as brothers seeking revenge for their father, but as leaders aiming to settle in fertile lands with the warriors they brought along. The fact that these armies did not return to Scandinavia after their victories on the island and instead settled in different areas on the island supports this view. Now, let's focus on another character depicted in the series. In the series, Floki is portrayed as building ships for Ragnar to venture into the seas. Additionally, Floki, a close friend of Ragnar, participates in many raids with him until Ragnar's death. After Ragnar's death, Floki comes to England with his sons, fights against King El, and then sets out alone to the seas, leaving England. During his sea journey, a storm drives Floki's ship to the shores of Iceland. Discovering Iceland in this way, Floki returns and shares his discovery with people, eventually going back to Iceland with those who want to settle on this newly found island. In reality, there was indeed a seafarer named Floki. However, unlike the series, Iceland was not discovered by Floki. Also, there is no historical source indicating that Floki was the one who built Ragnar's ships. In reality, Iceland was discovered around the year 860 by a seafarer named Gardar, who set out from Denmark with the intention of reaching Jutland on the west coast of Scotland. Gardar's ship was caught in a storm during the journey, and this storm brought him to Iceland. Since the land in Iceland was not very fertile, Gardar settled there and set sail again with the arrival of spring. After Gardar, a Viking named Nadid, during a journey from Norway to the Faroe Islands, was similarly caught in a storm and drifted to Iceland. Floki, among the Scandinavians, was the first person to consciously visit Iceland. Certainly, after witnessing a fjord-covered land on the island, Floki named the discovered lands Iceland and became the person who gave the island its name. In other words, Floki did not accidentally discover it. He had knowledge about the island and came there with his crew. In the continuation of the series, Ubba, one of Ragnar's sons, is depicted as a Viking leader who leads the settlement of Vikings in Greenland and America. However, at this point, the series has deviated from reality. Greenland was discovered a century after Ubba's death, in the 10th century, by a seafarer named Gunnbjorn Ulfsson. Gunnbjorn, caught in a storm during a sea journey from Norway to Iceland, was drifted to the coasts of Greenland, but considering the island unsuitable for settlement, he did not land and sailed back to Iceland. The entire island would later be discovered by a Viking named Eric the Red, also known as Eiríkur Rái in Old Norse. Eric was the one who named the island Greenland, and his stories about the country led to the gathering of hundreds of Vikings around Eric who wanted to settle there. Eric, along with those accompanying him, set sail from Iceland to Greenland and established settlements, marking the first settlements on the American continent, led by Eric's son, Leif Erikson. In the series, during the expedition to England with Ragnar and Ivar, Lagertha, Ragnar's former wife, kills a slog, Ragnar's other wife, to seize the city of Kattegat. Upon returning to Kattegat after Ragnar is sent to King Egbert by King Egbert, Ivar learns about his mother's death and vows revenge against Lagertha. Initially, avenging his father with his brothers, Ivar later decides that the time has come to avenge his mother and sets out to seize Kattegat. Lagertha killing a slog, Ragnar's other wife, is not found in any Scandinavian saga sources. A similar event is found in Gesta Danorum. According to this account, Lagertha killed Ragnar in a dispute with him and ascended to his throne. However, this event mentioned only in Gesta Danorum does not appear in any other source, making its historical accuracy highly doubtful. Moreover, the city of Kattegat, which caused the Viking Civil War in the series, did not actually exist. Kattegat is not a city but a sea located between Denmark and Sweden. The internal war among the Vikings depicted in the series has not been recorded in real historical sources. After capturing the city, Ivar, Bjorn, Lagertha, and Ubba go to England and serve King Alfred. After gathering their forces again, they besiege Kattegat and capture the city. Ivar, after this defeat, escapes from the city and travels along the Silk Road in a state of uncertainty about what to do. Hearing the news that he used to be a king, Russian Prince Oleg captures Yar with his soldiers and presents him before Oleg. Claiming to be of Scandinavian origin like Ivar, Oleg speaks to him in the Old Norse language. During his time there, Ivar witnesses some throne struggles. In the aftermath, Oleg, with the assistance of Ivar's prestige, sets out to conquer Scandinavia. Bors, to prevent the Russians and Ivar from taking Norway, confronts the Russian army, defeats them, but is fatally wounded by Ivar. Despite this, he manages to defeat the Russians, but he loses his life afterward. The Rurik dynasty, the founder of Kievan Rus, has never been interested in returning to Scandinavia, and members of this dynasty, in reality, never had Scandinavian origins. The Viking settlers, including the native Vikings of Scandinavia, were either raiding or settling in different parts of Europe because the Scandinavian territories were quite infertile. While the Russians had many fertile lands and rich cities to invade, attempting to conquer Scandinavia would be a rather senseless effort. There is no historical evidence supporting the Russians attacking Scandinavia alongside Ivar. Indeed, Ironside was not killed by Ar. In reality, Bjorn Ironside, a semi-legendary figure, is believed to have died from natural causes while ruling the Kingdom of Sweden. Now, why did the writers choose to depict a civil war that never happened in history? In reality, after the Great Heathen Army's invasion of England, characters portrayed as Ragnar's sons began living independently in different places. Since telling each brother's story separately might be challenging, bringing these characters together would make it easier. Moreover, the struggle between brothers may have seemed more captivating for a storyline. Therefore, the scenario of an internal war might have been created to extend the series for a few more seasons and to keep the audience engaged. However, this choice led the series to depart entirely from historical reality and tell a completely different story. After Bjorn's death in the series, Kattegat is seized by Harald Finehair, the king of Norway. Eventually, Ivar leaves Kiev and returns to Kattegat. While there, he convinces Ivar to embark on an expedition to England. During this expedition, the Vikings are defeated by King Alfred, and Harald dies on the battlefield. In reality, Ivar was never in Kiev. After the victories of the Great Heathen Army in England, he went to Ireland and settled in the city of Dublin. Later, around 873 AD, he likely passed away due to old age, and his death was welcomed with joy, especially by the Anglo-Saxons and the Christian world. Therefore, the relationships depicted in the final season of the series are entirely fictional. Towards the end of the series, King Alfred plans a coup, but he abandons it at the last moment. Nevertheless, his mother Judith learns about his coup plan and, to prevent a recurrence, poisons Ethelred. However, this event is not historically accurate. In reality, Ethelred's mother was not Judith but a woman named Osberga. Moreover, there is no historical record of Ethelred being poisoned by his mother. The conflict between the two brothers is not mentioned in the contemporary sources. Additionally, Ethelred did not plan a coup because, contrary to the series, he ascended to the throne before the arrival of the Great Heathen Army, and shortly afterward, he likely died due to natural causes following a series of battles against the Vikings. Alfred took the throne after his death. In this instance as well, the writers chose to depart from historical reality to enhance the viewing experience and possibly highlight the ruthlessness of medieval dynasties, providing a better portrayal of the conditions of the time. However, in doing so, they once again disconnected from historical facts. As a result, while the Vikings series may excel in visual effects and present an engaging storyline, its historical accuracy is compromised, warranting a score of 3 out of 5.